Welcome to CISOs Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I will be speaking with Ilan Dar. Ilan is the current CISO and VP of Engineering at a company called AutoFi, and he'll talk about the company in a minute and properly present himself. But looking back at the quick research notes that I've gotten about you, I see that you grew from the application security, or actually the application development space. You held a few positions there, and I believe your first formal position around information security, or actually maybe it was product security. I think that was at LiveOps back in 2012. So I see you have a lot of background in software development and product security, but maybe you could, and I see that you do have like 20 years of experience already, but maybe you could step in and introduce yourself and the company.
Sure, no, happy to. Yes, I mean, I consider myself to have a fairly non-traditional path to that CISO role. When I first started my career, even during my studies, I was always intrigued by application security. This was at the time where the internet was really starting to kick in, early 90s. And so I was curious about how things are working and how I can get into sites, get data, et cetera. So security was something that was a focus of mine, even as I was going through my undergraduate program for computer science. My focus when I was coming out of school was on security and in particular internet security. So I did a thesis on securing the routing information protocol as part of my studies, and then I joined a small startup that was building secure web servers. So as part of that, I learned really how to think about security from a product design and development point of view, and really how to build not just secure software, but how to build software that is designed to secure data. Along the way, I held different positions, whether it was in product management for a security appliance company, or other areas running operations. I really learned different aspects of what it takes to secure services, what it takes to really think about holistically around security. And that eventually led me to that point where when I joined LiveOps, which was the first time where I held a CISO or VP of security title, I really was able to bring everything that I learned for the first 15 years or so of my career, what it takes to really think about security, right, from the different facets, again, compliance, risk, application security, vendor risk, et cetera, et cetera. So you're right, that was kind of my first foray into that defined role of a CISO and the life of a CISO.
Mm-hmm. And I see that, and can you talk a bit about AutoFi?
Sure, happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so AutoFi is a startup that's focused on, we are a fintech company, so a financial technology company focused on the automotive space. And what AutoFi does is we work with both traditional car dealers and non-traditional entities that are looking to sell vehicles to consumers. The way we work with them is we have a platform that enables these sellers to engage consumers, whether it's online or at the dealerships, and go through the car buying process. You as a consumer, when you go into a dealer website and you're looking at their vehicle inventory, looking to buy a car, you're generally doing that before you even contact the dealer. And so what AutoFi really enables you to do is not not just go and look at the vehicle inventory, but also be able to start the process of buying the car by going through and basically what we call a deal jacket, building a deal jacket, figuring out what your earning power is, what the cost is going to be of the vehicle, even completing a loan application and submitting that to lenders online and getting credit decisions from banks within 90 seconds. So what we really do is enable that consumer experience that traditionally was reserved for consumers at the dealership. We now enable that to occur online, which is really, when you think about pre-COVID and even post-COVID, the market is really shifting towards buying cars online, the same way that the market has shifted from a consumer goods perspective to buying consumer goods online with the likes of Amazon, right? You think about where Best Buy and some of the older folks like Radio Shack and Circuit City, right? Yeah. That went the way of the dodo, and now you've got Amazon. So car dealers are realizing that unless they participate in this process online, because they are now dealing with a more educated a consumer, that unless they enable that consumer experience to occur fully online or predominantly online, they're not going to be able to be successful. So that's where they use AutoFi's platform to really enable that consumer engagement fully online.
And you're also the VP of Engineering at AutoFi and the CISO, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So my role within the company extends from development to quality assurance, operations, and security. Yeah. So many times I'm in conflict with myself. I will. What I would say is I depending on which hat I wear, I do end up getting into arguments with myself quite a bit about these things. But I think that it also enables me. One of the challenges you have as a CISO, especially when you're thinking about the conflicts of IT and application development, and many times, product organizations want to push something out that maybe is not very secure, maybe is not the best approach, and they're trying to shove that through and ramrod that through the security organization. In my role, because I also have these other hats, I'm able to think about these things and control these things from the ground up. So it really enables us as we're designing application features, or if we're thinking about how we're going to invest from an IT infrastructure or an operations perspective, I'm able to really consider and bring to the forefront a security mindset that, in our view, gives us a better chance of being secure than our competitors, right?
Yeah, and you can actually fully understand the risk. As wearing multiple hats, as you said, being the CISO and the VP of engineering. Even if you do introduce a risk, you can make sure that it's controlled and augmented. For an extent. Okay, thank you for that introduction. And before we dive right in, I always like to start with a couple of icebreaker questions here, just for our listeners to get to know you better. Sure. If you don't mind, can you tell the listeners about your marital status and your favorite drink?
Sure. Happily married for over 20 years to my wife, Stacy. We have 3 boys. Ranging from the oldest 18 to the youngest 6. So I'm very busy dealing with a college kid, a high school kid, and a kid in kindergarten. So it makes my life very challenging. But at the same time, having boys of that varied age really teaches you patience, but it also gives you perspective that I always like to translate into my work life, and that is that you really manage relationships and people at the individual level. Not everybody's the same. So they keep reminding me of that on a daily basis. Favorite drink? I've been a fan of wines for quite some time, in particular red wines. I'm a big fan of Rhone style wines. Rhone's is a region in France, and varietals and blends from there. So I have a fully stocked wine refrigerator in my house with a bunch of Rhone style wines. That's my weakness.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and do you find the proximity to Napa to be a plus then, or don't you enjoy the wines over at Napa as much?
So I think Napa has some great wines. Unfortunately, Napa has gotten too consumerized in essence. So I can recall back to my early 20s when I would go to Napa. It was a different experience than it is today. A lot of to me, the upcoming region now that's been experiencing great growth and great wines is the central coast of California, the Paso Robles and San Luis Obispo area. So it's really kind of a little bit north of Santa Barbara area, and including Santa Barbara regions as well. There's some great wines out there. So I enjoy going down there. I have family in that area, so it's great to just travel over there and try different wines.
Okay. Noted. Thank you. Let's dive right in. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. The purpose here is basically to get to know you better, not your company, but you, and focus on your path to the current role that you're holding. And basically, I'll be trying to learn more about you, about the role, about the tension between your various hats. I'll be asking a few questions about vendor relationship management as well. Yeah, and if you feel comfortable, we can dive right in.
Sure.
So what's the one thing you wish you had known before you began your career?
So that's a great one. I think that if I was to point to, there are many things that I wish I'd known, right? But the one thing that I can always point to is I wish I knew not to be afraid to ask questions and ask for advice. I think when you're young, when you're starting out, whether it's in engineering or in security, any kind of role, first you think you know something and you realize you don't, and then you're afraid of admitting the fact that you don't know it. And so a lot of times we try to do things on our own to figure out. It's great to try to learn on our own, but I think knowing not to be afraid to ask questions, not to surround yourself with people and seek advice, that's something that I wish I'd known. It would have helped me a lot early on in my career, and it still helps me today. I still surround myself with a bunch of advisors that help out throughout my work.
Yeah, and I think it's called. I know we have a similar issue in the consulting world. I'm not sure if it's called a consultant fallacy or not, but I found out that once you have, like a base, like a minimum set of knowledge, this is where you start to get too comfortable because you think you know it all, but you don't really know much at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm totally in agreement with you about that. I mean, I would never try to, I would never claim to know something I don't know, because I know it will just come to bite me in the ass.
Yeah,
it will come back to bite me in the ass. Yeah,
that's a sign. That's a sign of a senior person versus a junior person, right? Your ability to admit that you don't know something is the first step in acknowledging your limitations, right?
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say your biggest failure was, and what did you learn from it?
So, it's hard for me to think about a single failure that I can point to. What I can say is that I fail all the time, right? And to me, failure is a great opportunity to learn, right? It's a teachable moment. So if you kind of think about it, when we go through our day to day, if we don't experience failure, that can reinforce bad habits, right? The absence of failure does not mean success. The absence of failure means you haven't experienced failure yet. So to me, failure is a great feedback mechanism and a great opportunity to learn and to improve and to change things, right? So I'd say there isn't a single failure that I can point to. I can point to hundreds or thousands of failures throughout my career and my personal life too. I just use those as opportunities to learn.
Yeah, and actually, I like that quote, failure is a great feedback mechanism. I totally agree with that. Okay, and having touched on that perspective, what would you say your biggest accomplishment was?
Other than my marriage?
we could yeah, we could discuss that as well, and that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah, I really, what I would say is my ability to survive in the security industry for that long, right? For as long as I have, and to do so with, I think now I'm at my sixth startup. to continue to experience success and not get through burnout. I'd say that's probably an accomplishment. That's something that I celebrate constantly.
Yeah, and I've been talking to a lot of CISOs recently, and I've heard like that line so many times. Like so many people are surprised that they didn't burn out. But at the end of the day, I still talk to more and more people who's been in the industry for a long time, for like 20, 25 years now. So I'm wondering, what makes you stay then?
It's a thing that drives me every day, and that's self-learning, as evolving every day. I basically approach every day as an opportunity to learn. Again, you're going to look at a theme of how I approach work, how I approach views as a CISO, et cetera. It's about failure and learning, right? Life is a set of failures, and you can either take it on the chin and stay down, or you can learn from it and move forward. And so I think what keeps bringing me or motivating me to continue on is the fact that as a CISO, there are a lot of challenges. Your wins, and when something doesn't go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your failures are when something does go wrong. But you learn that when things do go wrong, and they will go wrong, you learn how to get better, right? You learn how to survive. You learn how to improve. And so that's what drives me. It's just that kind of that personal desire to just continue to be better and better every day.
Mm-hmm. So your passion is actually not necessarily around information security or even development. It's about learning, if I understand correctly.
That is the underlying theme to everything I've done. My passion really is around learning. And if you look at my career, again, kind of the non-traditional approach, I've wanted to always learn as much as I can about business, how businesses operate, with the goal of one day owning my own business. And so when I approached my career, I was looked at as, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of years figuring out how to be a really good engineer and what it takes to be a great engineer, right? And then I'm going to learn about product management. I'm going to learn about IT and operations, and even dabble into sales or finance, right? Everything that I can learn. And so it makes me a better individual in terms of looking at business and how things operate, and having that balanced view of business needs versus whatever my role is and how I can support the business. But it also gives me a better perspective personally, about, from a security perspective, how others in the organizations would think or would react and respond. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, my passion is all about information security. I've always, like I said, I've always been curious about cybersecurity. I've always been curious about application security. So those are things that, at a more micro level, drive me on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Now, look, as you mentioned, you've had a non-traditional way before you became a CISO, right? So, and for me, what I found out that you could find a few types of individuals before they become CISOs. So you have the group that grew out of IT, and you have the group that grew out of consultancy roles or even uh, methodologies, and then you have like a smaller group that grew out of being developers or being related to the software development space. Some of them maybe occupied the seat of a hacker for a few years before becoming CISOs eventually. And I believe I interviewed a few other CISOs similar path to yours, but because I'm giving this long introduction here because my next question is, what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? Now, I just want to set the stage for that, because as you mentioned, you had a non-traditional path.
Yeah. So what I would say really is, my advice would be prepared to work very hard and to experience failure. You talked about the fact that CISOs come from different facets, right? That gives you the sense of the breadth of responsibility and knowledge that a CISO has to bring to an organization. It is not, in some ways, CISOs wear multiple hats even within that role, right? And so you might come from one area and you might be very good around the IT side of things, right? You might come from a compliance side of things. You might come from an application security background. You've got the varied backgrounds, but a good CISO is going to be able to be a jack of all trades and a master of some, right? And to do that, if you come from one area, you're going to have to learn about the other areas. And that requires a lot of work, a lot of dedication. And again, as I said, a lot of failures in learning and failures in experiences where you think you figured it out, and you come to realize that no, you haven't even scratched the surface. So that would be my advice to those that are looking to pursue a career in InfoSec and kind of taking a path towards a CISO role.
So be prepared to work hard, and I can add to that, and be prepared to listen, right, and to surround yourself with more qualified individuals, I would say.
Absolutely. Never claim to be the smartest person in the room. Surround yourself by people that are smarter than you, right? And they're only going to bring you up.
Yes. And my next question is around the tension between holding the role of the CISO that's part of the IT organization. Now, in your case, you're actually, I mean, I believe that you are the IT organization. So what would you feel about that? I mean, the role of, so occupying the seat of the CISO and the seat of the VP R&D in your case, and I'm not sure where IT falls in there, but I'm sure there's tension. Maybe we can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, there's a tension that occurs. I touched on this earlier, in that there are times when we're trying to do something to support the business that has some tension between the need to get to market quickly, the need to invest on an operational side, choosing a vendor to work with, and the risks to the business. Again, the way I look at it is, as I always tend to take that holistic point of view of how do I support the business and how do I balance the needs of the business from a engineering, IT operations, and security perspective, right? And the fact that I hold the role in all of those, it allows me to really try to make the best judgment that is what I would say the most balance between all those aspects. Although there are times where you do have to make a decision that is probably, to support the business, that maybe is not the best option on the security side, but is the best on the operational side, or vice versa. So it always comes back down to understanding the business needs, understanding the business appetite for risk, right? And then being able to make the right decisions or direct the right actions for the organization based on that overall view across the different roles or hats that I wear.
Yeah, and can I assume here that communicating the risks to leadership is also very important? Because I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to, be the only party to assume that risk, especially if we're talking about business operations.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I wear those different hats does not dismiss or diminish the fact that communication is critical. I am always making sure that my colleagues at the leadership team, whether it's our CTO, our CEO, our general counsel, right? Anyone that really needs to be aware, informed, or that needs to participate in the decision process is communicated to. The way I look at my role, especially as a CISO, is one of informing people of risks and advising them, being an advisory role as to what are the options and what are recommendations. At the end of the day, the stakeholders that are involved in that decision making, right, are the ones that are going to be the most critical. And so you have to make sure that they continue to be informed, educated, and then given the opportunity to participate, ask questions, perhaps even challenge some of assumptions or recommendations, right? And again, make the best decision that is there for the business with the lowest risk possible.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier that one of the things that keep pushing you forward is the fact that you keep learning. Can you talk a bit about the best resources that have helped you learn along the way?
Number one, Google. Google is your friend. The information is out there. You just need to know how to search for it. Secondly, my peer network. So I made sure to surround myself with both official and unofficial advisors, people that I can rely on and ask questions, and in different facets. You know, it's within the engineering space, within the infosec space, within the legal space. Again, this goes back to don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for advice, right? So I surround myself with people that I can bounce ideas off of, that I can ask questions. How would you handle this? What do you see the issues with this approach? So I go to my peer network. I go to my trusted advisors. And ask those questions, right, and bounce ideas. And that's to me that's a great way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. And I might be wrong here, but I'm getting the vibe that sometimes when you're with a network of peers, some individuals would be a bit hesitant of asking questions because they fear that they might sound stupid. Because, as you mentioned, I mean, you have CISOs at all kind of levels, right? You have beginners, you have intermediaries, you have seniors and mentors, and some know more about application security, some know more about compliance, and so on. And I feel that sometimes people are afraid to ask for the fear of being perceived as, unprofessional.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes
Would you
sense. I
agree
mean,
with that?
I understand that, and it goes back to right what I would have taught myself when I was younger, right? And I see this constantly where people are afraid of asking questions because they're afraid of looking as though they don't know what they're doing or what they're talking about. The reality is that more often than none, you are more likely to fail as an organization because you failed to ask the right types of questions, right? Because of that fear to look stupid, right? And so
Yeah.
I would rather, say, hey, I may be the dumb guy in the room, and I'm okay with that. But let me ask you these questions because I don't get it, versus staying quiet and allowing the organization to make a really bad decision that puts them at risk because I was afraid to ask that question, or because someone else was afraid to ask the question. I would always prompt people to, hey, participate. It's okay to, if I'm the first guy raising his hand asking stupid question, now I'm giving you permission to ask your stupid questions too.
Might be a good way to start a conversation, actually.
Yeah.
Could you name a few individuals that you feel have been the most influential to you?
Common theme here. My wife, my parents, really, if I look at what they've taught me, and the things that I struggle with today still, right? Patience, taking the time to understand things, not being afraid to ask, um, um, surrounding yourself with good people, right? Those are the things that really, again, regardless of what profession you pursue and what role you have, those are great things to have in your life, right? Both in your personal and your professional life.
Okay, thank you. Is there one common myth about the profession or the field of information security and cybersecurity that you want to debunk?
Yeah, you touched on IT, right? And because I don't know what the percentages are, but a significant portion of CISOs come from that field, right?
Yes.
There's this misconception that security is the responsibility of the IT organization, right? Most people, when they think of cybersecurity, they think of IT, and the reality is that I read a report recently that said a study in 2020 said 95% of all breaches are based on human error, right? And so, right, regardless if it's human error that's affecting systems or whatnot, the end is that it is a people problem. It is a challenge that doesn't involve just systems. It involves human beings. It involves other aspects. And so really what I would say, the myth is that security is it's not the realm of IT. IT is one area of it, and there are a lot of other things that you need to think about that make up the aspect of security that, whether it's a CISO or anybody in our profession has to consider and think about.
Yeah. That's one myth, I think, that the security is an IT issue. But I've started to hear lately that a lot of individuals that want to get into the field, they might hear like comments like you need to learn how to code before you can understand security, and I mean, and I think we touched upon that, right? There's so many facets to security, and there's application security, there's compliance, there's IT, so and definitely there's an underline of people there that and at the end of the day, I mean, for me, it's security is above all things, it's a process, and this process is all encompassing. Could you touch a bit about the main concerns that CISOs nowadays have?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, there are two areas that are of what I would say kind of a growing threat or growing concern right now. One is the growth of the frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks, right? I don't remember the numbers exactly. I think I had it written down somewhere, but yeah, there it is. Attacks are occurring now over 2,000 times a day, cyber attacks, right? That's and it continues to climb, right? I think that stat is about a year or 2 years old. So the frequency and the level of sophistication that we're experiencing in these attacks, these cyber attacks, is one where it's becoming more and more problematic for us to fully secure, right, our systems, and to really we have to really worry about. It used to be that, hey, you think of you securing a house and you have to secure the windows and doors and all that. Well, now I have to secure all the nooks and crannies that are out there and all the cracks in the walls, right? And it's just very difficult for us to do that. So it makes our jobs a lot harder. I think the other pattern that I see here is as we move more and more into the cloud, or as the ecosystem grows, um, our organizations, technology organizations in general that I see have a growing reliance on third parties, right, to provide their services. And that third party risk management becomes a lot more complicated, right? When you're going from having 20 vendors that you have to worry about, and where the data is, and what access they have to your systems, and et cetera. When you go from 20 to 100 to 500, where some of the big companies are, it becomes very challenging, right, to really manage. So I'd say, especially in smaller organizations, it becomes a difficult piece to manage on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely, I agree with that. Um, do you mind sharing a bit about your daily routine? We're doing like a survey, like a poll here.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So my daily routine in terms of what? In terms of how I kind of go about thinking security on a daily basis, or in approaching the role?
Some other interviewees has shared everything from the moment they woke up and got out of bed to the number of coffee cups they had. So it's really up to you.
Yeah, I mean, that coffee, that's the first thing, right? When you wake up, absolutely has to be, especially with kids, and how we live life these days, right? With the craziness of COVID. So the first thing I try to do, if I can, is go for a swim. And that's just because I want to get my mind kind of reset. I feel that if I exercise before I start my day, it allows me to be more alert. It allows me to kind of withstand all the craziness that comes our way throughout the day. So that's kind of that mindset of, hey, get ready for a battle, right? And then to me, I try to catch on the latest events that are happening I'll go to some websites like Krebs on security, CISO magazine. I'll go to IAP. I'm also involved with data privacy, and so I really kind of try to see what are the things that are coming out, what's going on in terms of current events, current potential risks, new things that we need to be aware of and start considering. I'll go out and check chatter on my peer network, right, to see if there's anything that anyone's reporting that I may have to look at. Those are the big kind of day-to-day that I start with, and then I get right into work, right? And that, even within the CISO role, is a significant amount of prioritization and hyper focus on different things, right? We touched about all the different facets that CISOs have to think about, and so really you have to prioritize and carve enough time for a lot of different things that you need to deal with, right? At that point in time, it's almost 20% of my day is proactively planned, and 80% of it is just reacting to the noise or the activities that are going on through that day.
Okay, interesting. And I wanted to ask you a general question about budget planning without delving into the details here. In your opinion, was there any change, like any trend shift from 2019, 2020 to 2021?
Well, I think a shift that we saw in the industry, and it's not something that we experience necessarily at AutoFi, but I see in the industry, and that's that shift towards remote work, right? A lot of organizations are shifting towards that full virtual workforce and trying to figure out how to support and secure the organization with a fully virtualized organization, right? And that, to me, is something that has occurred, again, part of COVID-19, but I really see, as we look at the industry and the tech industry and a lot of organizations moving to full VO or a heavy hybrid model, that's going to continue to be there, right? Gone are the days for most of us of the simple commute into the office and locking up our networks in the office, right?
Yeah.
The other part that I'd say is, again, it goes back to relying on third parties and vendors, right? And that ecosystem, and then you couple that with the emergence of a bunch of data privacy laws, right? And what you're seeing here is a hyper focus now on data security, right? It's not to say that we've neglected data until now, but it creates an additional focus and attention required to really understanding what data do you have, where do you have it, who's got access to it, how do you secure it, how do you maintain access to it, and so all those aspects are now magnified or multiplied because of the reliance on the growing set of third parties that you rely on, and of course with CCPA and CPRA and other privacy laws and acts that are coming out. It's starting to, or if you're dealing with GDPR, right, it's really magnifying that need for you to understand and manage your data.
Yeah, and you tie that to privacy laws because I'm assuming because of the breach notification that you need you need to be able to notify about breaches.
I mean,
right?
you first have to need to know what data you have, where is it, and who's got access to it, because again, as part of data privacy laws, there's this concept of data subject rights, and data subject rights really mean that they have the ability to ask, what data do you have of mine, and where is it, and can you delete it, right? There's some laws that require that. So the ability to support that is basically tied to your knowledge of what data you have and where is it and who's got access to it. The other part to that, of course, is with the increase of cyber attacks that I mentioned earlier, the frequency, the average cost of a data breach is about $3.5 million per incident right now, right? You want to make sure you understand what exposure points you have, right? And what you need to do to tackle those. So knowing where your data is, who's got access to it, those are important things that really help you establish that solid baseline, right? From a CIA perspective, as a CISO, to really address this from a data security and data privacy perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk a bit about vendors, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If you can put yourself in the shoes of the vendor, for just a moment, what's the one promise you would make to yourself that you would never do when engaging with a new customer?
So, all too often, I see vendors reaching out to me with very little understanding of my business. And so, what I would say really is if you're a vendor, spend some time to understand your audience, spend some time to understand who you're who you're reaching out to and what pain points you're trying to solve. I can give you an example of one of the worst things that I had. I had someone reach out to me and say, hey, Ilan, as the VPE and CISO at AutoFi, I'm sure you're worried about managing your fleet of vehicles. Well, you've got my name and my title, right? That's as much as you pulled and researched. If you spent any time, you would have known that we have nothing to do with vehicles and managing fleets, right? And so that shows a lack of awareness. It shows a lack of interest to really partner together. And it's just pure, hey, let's just blast out this mailer out to people with really not understanding our target audience. That's something that if I was on the vendor side, I wouldn't want to do, right? It's a waste of my time, and it creates nothing but frustration on the other side.
Yeah, and it aligns with the recurring theme of reaching out in a cold kind of way without doing enough research. I've heard that a lot.
Yep.
Is there one most annoying sales pitch that you could talk about briefly?
Yeah, like I said, it was that email.
That one?
After they
Okay.
sent that email, they called me too. And not once, but multiple times. And so great for them. They managed to get my phone number, my email address, my title, and my name, all good. But they did nothing with that information to actually understand me. That was the most annoying thing that I really experienced. And um, being from Israel, you would understand this. I'm a fellow Israeli as well. I did not hold back from telling them what I thought of their lack of effort or research.
Okay. Yeah, I can only assume. Um, so what is it that you are looking for in a vendor?
Yeah. Um, First and foremost, a partner, right? And what I mean by that is that this is the same approach that I take when I hire people as well. I split things into two concepts: aptitude and attitude. And what I mean by that, aptitude is kind of the hard skills. We always talk about hard skills or capabilities, right? And attitude is how you approach things. I'm looking for someone with the right attitude. They may not have the best product. So if you think about it from an aptitude perspective, they might not have what I'm looking for fully today. But if they're the right partner and they're willing to grow with me and support me in my needs, and we can we can have a great relationship going forward. That's the kind of partner that I want to have. That's the kind of vendor that I want to work with. So, right. So someone that spends their time understanding my pain points, someone that is willing to work with me, not nickel and dime me all the time, not try to shove a concept or product that maybe doesn't fit what I need, but understands, hey, okay, great. It's not the right time. This is not the right product for you. Maybe we can work in the future, right? Those are the types of people and organizations that I want to work with, right?
Mm-hmm. And are there any specific CISOs in the industry that you look up to?
Yes, I mean there are two. It's interesting when I look at CISOs in the industry. There are a couple of them that I've had the pleasure of either listening or meeting. Alan Alford, who used to be the CISO at Mitel. He's also used to be on one of the podcasts that I listen to, which is a CISO series, Defense in Depth. Really enjoy his views on the security industry, and I follow a lot of his kind of questions and writings on LinkedIn. The other person that I kind of knew in passing, in a sense that he was a predecessor of mine at LiveOps, my first role as a CISO, Niall Brown, who is now the CISO at Palo Alto Networks. He was also a CISO at Workday for some time, and as I mentioned, my predecessor at LiveOps. I kind of got to know him through all of the artifacts that he left after he left LiveOps and that I took on. And was impressed with his work. And then as I kind of got to follow him through a Workday and eventually recently met him, really impressed. He really is to me someone that understands things, and I like his views on the industry and how he approaches infosec in general. Again, kind of same mindset of supporting the business, right? So those are two that I generally follow. I would say I take their guidance and views, and generally 90% of the time I agree with those views, right? So align very well on from that perspective.
Okay, and I'm assuming you have like a social media presence where listeners can connect with you online.
I'm really quiet on social media. I try to avoid too much presence on there, just because it creates opportunities to reach out to me with some really stupid requests or blasts about managing our fleets of vehicles, right? So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect to folks. I'm pretty good about responding to outreaches and messages on LinkedIn. That's really the medium where I participate the most. And I find that some of the other mediums that I was involved in, I didn't like the way they were going on. I prefer to participate in online groups, small groups on LinkedIn, and some meetups. But in terms of social presence, LinkedIn is the way to reach out to me and connect.
Okay, but let's ask the same question from a different angle. Yeah. Is there any way vendors can connect to you in a non-intrusive manner?
To me, email is the best way to usually get my attention. I'm still old school. A lot of times I talk to people like, email, man, I don't use email. I still use email. I still like to communicate through email. I still like to have emails come to me, because it's an asynchronous form of communication. I have always, followed a GTD, a getting things done methodology. So it allows me to keep my inbox very clean. I'm happy to report my inbox is less than 20 messages on a daily basis, which takes a lot of work. But what that means is that email is the best way because it's going to come to my attention. I'm going to read through it. Unlike some of other people who have tens of thousands of messages, right? Where your chances of getting their attention are probably through email are probably 0 to none. So email is the best way to get a hold of me. Mm-hmm. And okay. I do read those things, right? But if you're going to send me something that shows lack of thought and research, be ready to hear about it.
Yeah, and I have to say I'm the same. I work mostly out of my inbox, so yeah. Same here. What's the single most important thing to you in your career?
We touched about it on it, and you pointed it out earlier. It's personal growth, right? It's really about taking the opportunity to learn something new every day. And that's a question I ask myself every at the end of every day, right? Is, did you learn something new today? And if I did, no matter how small it is, that was a good day. If I didn't, then it was a failure, right? You asked me about failures earlier too, right? So I treat days where I did not learn something new as a failure and an opportunity to learn. Why did I not learn something new? Did I not spend my time in the right places? Did I not give something enough attention or take the opportunity to do something new? So that's really what I do. It's all about learning and just becoming better every day.
Okay, thank you. And we're almost at the end of this episode. And let's just wrap this up with a couple of quick questions, which are on on the funner side for me to ask, if you had unlimited funds, what would you do with your life?
You know, I've asked myself that question plenty of times where I daydreamed about winning the lottery. I'd start my own company. In reality, I'd be bored if I wasn't working. I enjoy working. I enjoy keeping my mind sharp, and I've got plenty of ideas, crazy ideas for companies. I'm not ready to take that step yet, right? I talked about my career kind of being a progression and understanding holistically the views of how to run a company and eventually having my own company. That's what I would do. Self-fund.
Okay, so you start your own company.
Right.
I'll probably transition out of my company, but
Yeah, for those of us that have started companies, yeah, our the idea is to get out, but
yeah.
I haven't. I've been in a number of startups and been very fortunate to see some good success in a few of those. I really think that again that some of learning that I had over the years and being able to apply that into starting my own company to see whether what I've learned can really be applied in practice. That to me is kind of the final goal, right? And when I'm done with that, then I can step back and say, all right, I'm done.
Well, that's that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that as well. Have you read or listened to anything recently that have inspired you?
So I have an author that I really enjoy reading his books and listening to him speak, Simon Sinek, a great speaker. I've read a number of his books, and recently I decided to reread Start With Why, which is a great book. In my opinion, one of the best kind of books that a leader can really read. And so I just recently reread that, and I loved it. It was interesting how going through it the second time around, I picked up on small little things that I didn't pick up the first time around, right? That are great inspirations and great points for me to take in my work.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend reading the book or following his video online. Start With Why. It's a short video that really tells a great story that businesses and individuals should really follow.
I remember that one. It was it made an impact on me as well. I didn't read the book though, but I'll sure try to add that to my list. We're reaching the end of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining today, Ilan. And I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I think you provide some great information for our listeners to take home, to go home with. And hopefully some of your answers would resonate with the listeners as well. And thank you so much and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you so much.